May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Kook Audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Kook Audio and Kook Archives, preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths crossed his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So today we have a guest, Peter van der Sterre. And Peter has been practicing Zen at the San Francisco Zen Center and on his own and with his own group for quite some time now. You'll hear all about it in his podcast. He's a contractor. He did the renovation of the Gringo Zendo, and he's got a group in Boise. His main one's in San Francisco, but now they're pretty much sticking with Zoom. And it's called, I think it's called the Oak Street Zendo. Let me check. That's right. The Oak Street Zendo. So it's got a website, oakstreetzendo.org, I imagine. But it would just have like that bare minimum information, he told me. Hey, there's a neat thing about him. His parents went to Reed College. Now that might not mean anything to most of you, but Reed College is where Gary Snyder went and Philip Whalen and many, many people from the San Francisco Zen Center, many people who became Zen students and many calligraphers. Steve Jobs went there, and that's why we initially anyway had all the fonts we had, because he studied calligraphy there. Okay, well, that's enough. Let's give Peter a call right after we've had our pause to meditate, and let's see what he has to say. So when you hear the sound of the bell, if you're of such a mind, hit pause and meditate or whatever for as long as you wish, and when you're through, ready to come back, hit unpause, we'll hit the bell to end the meditation, and we'll get going with Peter van der Sterre.
Hey, David, can you hear me?
Hi, Peter. How you doing?
Well, how's the weather in Boise?
Yeah. Yeah, everything's fine here. Had a little earthquake recently. How's it going? How's it going there?
Well, San Francisco just, goes on, and, we, generally speaking, cycle between 60 and 70 degrees, and it's partly sunny today. The water's warm. One of my things these days is swimming in the bay. So 60 degrees is kind of terrific. And, I'm a city guy. I grew up in cities. I still think they're normal. And so it's blocks from Zen Center. And so...
yeah, right. Yeah.
So I'm usually around the neighborhood, and I don't spend a lot of time there, but there's a number of places in town that I'm almost always going to be seen in any given week, whether it's the Dolphin Club or a couple of cafes that I like or some new parts of town. So there's always something going on. There's a rather, there's some great museums around, and they've been to a terrific Diego Rivera show at the Museum of Modern Art, and just on and on, just taking taking things easy, and when I need to get out of town, going up to Mount Tam for a hike, that's about an hour from here. So I drive to Stinson, and then walk up to Pantoll Station or some such place.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
enough
Yeah.
workout, to satisfy, and it's gorgeous country.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
life is good.
Yeah. What's the name of your group?
I didn't really want to, get into sort of temple names, so I called my first place Oak Street Zendo,
Yeah.
and the other one up in Boise is the 7th Street Zendo.
Hey, that's cool. Boise is in Boise, Idaho.
That's right.
Ah.
Yeah, I've had a friend since my days in New Mexico. I lived in New Mexico. That was the last hop before I came to Zen Center in 1971, 72.
Mm-hmm.
And we've stayed in touch, and he's in Boise, and I went up, I would go up there over the last 10 or 15 years, maybe even more, to visit and enjoy the scenery there. And when my place, I had a place with Mimi, my first and only in the Castro. And when she finally was ready to make the move, she bought a place in the East Bay. We sold the place, and with that money, I bought a building that looks kind of like a big house, but is actually an apartment building that was originally a Basque boarding house. Sheep herders
neat.
would come into town in the winter when they couldn't run their sheep, and they live in these places that have kind of like two-room, whatever you'd call two-room units with the toilet down the hall, and who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it's a great old place, and I love to fix up buildings, so we rebuilt the attic level, put a Zendo up there, and connected it to my place on the second floor. So it's really super comfortable. I haven't been up there in a year, but my younger son, we called him Sam for years, but he's now he's using his given first name, which is Jan, and he's living up there. Finished up his engineering degree and has got himself a great job and thriving. So we're happy for him.
Is your so all right now? So you've got the the Oak Street Zendo and the 7th Street Zendo.
Right.
Is there a name? Pardon me. Is there a name for the umbrella group for the whole thing?
We don't have another name. If you look at any of my correspondence, you'll see Oak Street Zen .org or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Give me the website. Give me the website.
That web page, that web page will give you some idea, a little bit of an idea of what we're up to.
Yeah. And the web page address is
Oak Street Zendo
.org,
I believe.
Let's
see. Yeah, it's www.oakstreetzendo.org.
Yeah, yeah. Where were you in New Mexico?
I was living on the Zuni Reservation.
Oh, I know where that is. Wow.
Just south of Gallup.
Yeah.
About a half an hour, 40 minutes south of Gallup. I had some good friends there. Actually, my sister has been living in New Mexico most of her life. She was a hero for me in those days and continues to be. But anyway, in visiting with her, some of her contacts she knew some people who were teachers in Zuni, and they had some friends in the Zuni world. And so when I decided that I was looking for a place out in the high desert, they say, well, you can go live there. And it's a little town south of the capital, about, 15 minutes or whatever, called Ojo Caliente. And one-room adobe, lived there for about half a year.
It's called Ojo Caliente?
Ojo Caliente, hot spring or hot eye.
Yeah, well, there's one of them in northern New Mexico. I've been to it a number of times.
That's a common name for a hot spring.
It was a really nice place. It was great. It had like 5 different types of water. You go out of Taos. It was about, I don't know, maybe an hour from Taos. Really great place. Well, that's interesting. Oh, God. Do you remember Rama, New Mexico?
Rama?
Rama.
Rama is an old, it's got some great old buildings, and it was originally a Mormon kind of a stronghold.
It's completely Mormon.
Yeah. And so they were just operating out of there. Those old stone buildings, I always notice the buildings in the worlds that I circle through. And Rama's cool, and sort of, it's not in a direct line, but it's sort of you can kind of loop through there on your way to Zuni if you're going south from Gallup.
I spent the night there because I had all these abalone shells, and I couldn't sell them or I couldn't trade them directly to Indians. It was against the law. And there was a guy in Santa Fe turned me on to a guy in Rama who traded all these blankets, Mexican blankets, to me for that. I had hundreds of the type of abalone shells they like to make jewelry with. And so I just remember that. And he said he was the only non-Mormon in town. And he said, but they treated him like a Mormon. He said he couldn't pay for anything, if he needed plumbing or electrical or work or anything.
That's great. Well, I had a great time in Zuni. Mostly I was by myself. And I had good friends that would visit from time to time. And the family that I thought it was only appropriate to pay rent. They didn't want rent, but that was fine. And the deal was actually they still thought it was theirs, and so the women and the kids would come out in the summertime and farm. So here I am, I'm on my place, and all of a sudden, what feels like 2 or 3 families, and who knows how many kids show up, and so I'm right in the middle of the Zuni world, and you could never arrange this, but it was great fun, and the kids. The kids used to like to tell me dirty jokes in Zuni, the girls. They thought that was pretty funny. So I had no idea exactly what they were saying, but you could sort of see what was happening.
Well, there's Zuni is supposed to have the language cognates with what? Japanese, Chinese. There's all sorts of weird things about Zuni. They're anthropologically they're very different from most Indians.
Oh yeah, for sure. And even though they call them pueblos, peoples, they're certainly not Hopi. They have their own real deep traditions and religious cycle. And every year, some families are somehow or other chosen. Various tribal families are chosen to do what they call a shalico house. And the family that I was connected to was doing one the year that I was there, and they hired me. I said I'd be happy to help. And they said, well, what we need is an electrician. Well, I'm not an electrician, but, as was my habit in those years, of course, I'm perfectly willing to try. And so I got involved in building the Shalico house, which was really kind of great. I mean, it was in town. And so I got a chance to just sort of mix it up. And one of the kind of more amazing sights I saw while I was working there one day, they have, these sort of, what would be called? Anyway, they're really rough wood kind of slab that sort of slammed together into a kind of a little corral. And there were a couple pigs in it. And I'm just, sort of watching the goings on here. And like a 12-year-old kid with a rifle goes up to the corral, and a pig stands up on his hind legs to see what was going on. And he shoots the pig. And within like a minute, some horde of women descend and pull this pig out of the corral, put him out on pallets, and then start, dumping boiling water over him and scraping down the hide and, bleeding him out and everything. So that, late afternoon, we had some part of that pig. I wasn't that hungry, but still, a very fast transformation.
Wow.
So when I first came to Benson, everybody thought I was in New Mexico because that's all I could talk about.
Where are you from originally?
Well, I actually was born in San Francisco. My folks came down here just before the bridge. They met at Reed in Portland.
No kidding. Your parents went to Reed.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
My grandfather actually worked for Reed. He was their financial guy.
Wow. I've got a whole page on Q.com about Reed, all the Zen Center people that came from Reed and Zen friends. And did you ever have any involvement with Reed?
No, not really. I visited one time, and no, not much contact. I actually haven't been to Portland that much. Been up there a few times, but that part of it was just sort of part of my family legacy. But no, there are lots of. I have lots of family connections up in the Pacific Northwest. On my mother's side of the family, that her brother was a big-time politician involved in public and private water power, and my first house I built up there on Whidbey Island.
Oh, Whidbey, far out, yeah.
During the time, it was the same year or summer or whatever that Shoboan was getting put together.
In Nevada City, Richard Baker's place.
Yeah, and Richard was trying to get me into working on that, and I said, no, I have other plans. So I went up to Whidbey and did that instead, which was just fine by me.
Far out. Yeah, a lot of people worked on that. Whidbey, I've been there a few times. Shoto Harada, the teacher, the Rinzai teacher I studied with in Okayama in Japan, they have a place there.
Sure. Was Priscilla there? Huh?
Priscilla? You know Priscilla?
Yeah. I met her through another family of good friends up in Seattle. The what's it called? It's not Pioneer Square, but it is.
I'm not good at that. I can't remember names.
Yeah. Anyway, the big sort of mercantile center on the wharf.
Yeah.
It's an old. I'm damned if I can think of the name of it. Anyway, that architect that I was good friends with his family. Anyway, he was the guy responsible for saving it from the developers. So.
Oh yeah.
For us.
Yeah, it's a great area. Huh.
Yeah.
Huh. Now in Idaho, Layla was going to Idaho.
Right.
Right. She had a group there.
Yeah. She's got a group in Montana.
Montana. I'm off.
And she's got a number of people that know and really like her in Boise, and she has stopped there and done retreats there, or they've gone out to her place. I've got a couple of old guys. They're older, they're younger than me, but anyway, in Boise. And Layla actually came to visit. I wasn't there at the time, but she stayed at my place because I was more than happy to, host her.
Yeah.
And I heard, that she's somewhat stable, but definitely is, got kicked around quite a bit by the chemo or the whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I'm following her condition, and I do get that impression, and I'm just watching and waiting. But she and Jim they were down to Yosemite or something just now. So
recently?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, good. Like now or
well, that's cool.
A week ago or a month ago or so. I lose track. Now, so your Zendo upstairs, your son is living in it. Do you all do Zoom sittings?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Zoom is what it really created, Oak and 7th Street Zen. Since COVID, we usually have better part of a dozen folks on any given morning. We sit 6 mornings a week.
Oh.
And 2 evenings. Oh. And I couldn't be more grateful. I mean, to me, it's been just a complete blessing and unexpected because when I started out here at Oak Street, I mean, I was like very excited to see 2 or 3 people, show up and sit with me.
Yeah.
But in person is one thing, but, Zoom is quite easy. And so we have a pretty diverse group of people, some on the East Coast, and one in Albuquerque, who really delighted by, and then two up in Portland, who I'd love to tell you about because I like them tremendously, and we're going to do transmission in the new year, so we're working on that.
Oh, tell me.
I never expected to be doing this, David. I mean, I have always felt connected, and I've always felt, like I've been coming and going. But, Norman was really the person who was responsible, not for, I guess you could say, bringing me back in, but it all happened, in the late, before the 2000s began. Ken Sawyer and I were doing the renovation of the Green Gulch Zendo.
Right.
And I was really, it was a great job and a great fun to do.
Big job, too.
Norman was, I think, at Abbott there at the time.
That's right.
I didn't have much contact with him other than I knew he was doing sashins. And so, I dropped into a few, and then, I just began to hang around. And every day, it was really fun to watch every day unfold. It's kind of terrific. Ken Sawyer was going to be the first Chusseau for every day in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And then because Betsy is Betsy, Elizabeth, and she and Norman were coming, clashing a bit. And I think there was some idea that Elizabeth thought maybe she should be the first Chusseau, but Norman didn't see it that way. So I think out of loyalty, Ken had to withdraw or something like that, and I was sort of next in line. So it was great fun. And, every day is thriving in many ways, but now it just feels like kind of a generational shift. And I'm not around because I got plenty to do with whatever I've got in front of me.
Yeah. Norman he's been, so many people have related to him in ways that invigorated their practice. I can't keep up with it. I mean, pretty impressive.
It's wonderful to see. It's wonderful to see. I haven't been to, actually, I went up to Red Cedar Zen, whatever, one time when John Bales was the Chusseau, but in general, I don't get around that much.
Yeah.
I did go to Mexico for one of his winter things, and that was great.
Yeah.
So, he's got 3 or 4 places that he makes the rounds in every year. And so, a lot of people are counting on him to show up and keep the endless road open, which he has done masterfully.
Yeah.
But giving you a little history, if you're interested.
Yeah, sure.
My first contact with Zen Center was in 1968.
Oh, let's hear.
You remember Larry Hansen.
Of course.
And he and Lori got married at Sokoji, and I was there. And, of course, to me, it was just like weird. But the one thing that stayed with me is I'd never seen anybody walk the way Suzuki walked. It was just like, this is interesting. And so I thought, well, that's all kind of wonderful. And then I promptly forgot all about it. And then traveled for 4 years. And then I came back in 1972, just within, actually, a friend in New Mexico, in a sense, one of the families that was sort of sponsoring me. They gave me work and put me up and would feed me from time to time. Gave me a copy of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And, spending a couple of weeks with that book, and he sounds like he's talking from inside of me. I had to, go check it out.
Yeah.
So I showed up and promptly, got enmeshed in the tar baby of Zen Center.
What did you go to the city center first?
Yeah, I showed up at the city center. Isan opens the door, and we're off and running. So I spent most of the time, up until we went down to Tassajara, in the city, at the city center. Although I did bounce out to Green Gulch, and Robert Lytle and I think were the first guest students at Green Gulch. And I don't remember too much about it other than living in the Zendo. And maybe you were working on sanding the floor at that point. And
I did help. What's his name? Who he died like 10 years ago or something. The guy who there was one guy who in charge.
John Scott?
No. God. What a job! I mean, that Zendo floor.
That floor was. That was it was a steer barn, so that floor was pretty rough, to put it mildly.
Oh yeah, it was like
great
3x8s or something.
Yeah,
I don't know what.
The depth of those timbers must have been at least a foot.
Oh yeah, okay.
On edge, and maybe there were a nominal three wide, and maybe a 12 deep.
And they were uneven, so there would be some like an inch higher. So the first thing, I might remember his name. The first thing he did was use an adze, which is like an axe, except the blade is coming toward you. And he went around, and I did a lot of adzing with him. There might have been more than one. And then I guess I was work leader, yeah. And then after that, he got this industrial power sander that had sandpaper with a number of 2 and 3. They had pebbles on the bottom.
Right, I know what you mean. I've seen it. Yeah.
I'd never seen anything like it. And then just kept going down, kept going over it. I worked on it some.
Right.
I could probably find his name and stick it in here because there's stuff on him on Cuke.com. And I remember when he died. And you helped me on the bullpen up there. Ken and I were remodeling. We took the bullpens up Spring Valley up there at the end before it goes up into the hills, and made the bullpens into 2 housing units, one for him and Elizabeth, and one for Diane and me. And we had babies, and that was terrific. And you worked on that with me, and you were good, man.
Well, there's a whole lot of things. One of the things that I'm really amazed by is how much I've forgotten, and how I remember all kinds of things, and I also have forgotten all kinds of things. But the number of things that I missed, the number of things that were going on, sort of all around me, which I had no clue about. Which is fine. This is life, but it's just amazing all the worlds within worlds that were there and that we shared, and it's been really an intriguing and kind of pleasing adventure to sort of review with the folks, not just the uproars and such, but some of the real fine-grained stuff or things that I come to appreciate. I gave a talk at Page Street, the only one I think I ever did, quite a few years ago now, 5 or 6 years. But one of my favorite stories was I told about a picture of Jerome that's in what we used to call the art room.
The art room. You mean that little room on the just past the office on the left?
That's right. That's right. A lounge of some sort. But at any rate, there's a picture of Jerome, and not exactly a little altar, but there's a number of some of the old sages there. And then under Jerome's picture is a statement by him, which he says, the trouble with Buddhism or Buddhist practice is it's invisible, which is a great statement. Yeah.
Jerome was, he was a gem that wrapped in roughness that many, many people did not see or appreciate his wisdom and uniqueness. And what an amazing person.
It is. It's true. And, I didn't wake up to Jerome until years later. And so, that's just my loss. But glad I eventually had the sense to, which is, true of many things about practice. And from the time that I was at Zen Center, which is basically 72 to 84, but I was, my center of gravity was shifting already outside of Zen Center. I think my last, how should I say, station may have been at Gringos. I'm not exactly sure, but I was already doing private carpentry gigs in Muir Beach, I remember, for a period of time. But then in 84, I kind of returned to the marketplace. I knew I think I was married by that time. Yeah, I'm sure I was. And I knew I was going to have to, make some money and so on. So I started up a building business, and I did that pretty much until
What year? What year was that?
I think 85 to 2015. So that's what, 30 years?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And,
wow. And where were you living? You were living in this city, though, because you had that place.
Pretty early on, we bought the place in the Castro on Ford Street. And so Mimi and I were there with the guys until, I guess, around 90. I can't remember when we separated, but we were together, I think, for 14 years. Then by that time, I was doing both construction and I was doing 12-step work. Come from a long line of alcoholics, so that was both a comfort and a revelation.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I'm surrounded by 12-step stuff here.
Yeah, well, it is. Specifically, I think in terms of, Buddhist practice, it's a tremendous compliment because Buddhism is gets you kind of a sense of continuity and community, and 12-step gets you, in case you weren't, much more connected to your emotional, how should I say, dystopia, and everything that goes with it. And I am forever grateful, and maintain a fair number of connections with some of the folks from that world that are also we have in common, like Laura Burgess and Tim Wicks.
I wasn't aware of that when I was around Cincinnati. I didn't quit drinking until 2004.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Yeah. My mate could drink it. We got married here, had a long relationship with that. And so I just stopped drinking when we got together, and there were reasons. Not all, but almost all our friends here come out of meetings and 12-step, all that, tennis partners and all sorts of stuff. And we're involved with the treatment center here. Anyway, that's very interesting to know. I can't talk about it much because it's anonymous, and there's a lot of people that don't want to.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
No,
people that have spent time in those meetings are almost invariably extraordinarily grateful for those times and that community and those opportunities. And so it's just going on and on. I'm not actively practicing 12-step these days, or going to meetings particularly, because I don't feel any particular need to. But for my son these days, he's going into an extraordinarily rough patch. My older son, he's been dancing ballet for the last 25 years.
Oh.
He knew at the age of 10 or 11 what he wanted to do, and pursued this passion. And got to be a rock star dancer. Went to New York City and studied with the New York City Ballet, and was in that company for 5 or 6 years, I think.
Wow, pretty impressive.
But then he crashed out of there. He got injured. Is the story he tells. I'm not exactly sure of all these particulars, but he was injured and then misdiagnosed and then self-medicating and clubbing to kind of try to tough his way through it. And then, even though he was continuing to participate and seemed like he was performing on a pretty high level, I was expecting him to be performing in Europe and was going to go out there and try to catch up with him. The next thing I knew, he was at the home of a friend in Palo Alto and not making any sense. Whatever he was saying was nothing other than just sort of confusing and alarming. So now
I've experienced that. I had we had a number of years of that. But go on.
So right now, within this past 6-month period, his career as a dancer has come to an end. He's always had, pretty high value as a performer. He knows what to do and he looks like he belongs up there. But as the end of his career has approached and as his addictions, flaring and his anxiety level is raging along with his anger and everything else, his deficits began to outweigh what he could offer, and the company here in San Francisco, which he's been with for the last 2 years, let him go. And, he knew he was coming to the end anyway, but this was a sudden stop. And now he's going to have to reinvent himself. Whereas earlier, when he crashed out of the New York City Ballet, he had the motivation of getting back to dance. And so with talk therapy and some bipolar meds, he was able to, sort of get back on track and become a pretty high functioning dancer. But his affinity for, addictive behavior has always been an element, but now it seems to be dominant, and we'll see whether he can make rather challenging.
I hope that works out. I've seen people go both ways.
Only thing I know is it's not gonna be any quick resolution. It's gonna go on.
Yeah.
So I'm being prepared for that. And my younger son, who is somebody who's always impressed me quite a bit, he started out as, quite dyslexic. I remember trying to teach him what we used to call math facts or multiplication tables. He could not do that. He could not recall that information.
Oh, that's an unusual type of dyslexia with math. Wow.
Yeah, I would say whether it's unusual or not. Anyway, it was quite pronounced, and he went around in some extra. He did some extra rounds of various kind of supportive schooling and stuff, and then he went on to college. And with each year, he continued to perform better and better. And the thing that I think really distinguishes him, at least in my mind, is that he's always been willing to work at things he was not particularly good at. Which is the kind of you got to admire in people.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So he's now finished up his engineering credential and is doing some pretty creative stuff up in Boise. So we're happy for him. Yeah, he's living in my place and enjoying the it's hot up there in the summertime. It's cold in the winter. Gorgeous countryside, and it's got a wonderful small town feel, very friendly. You go into a cafe there and people talk between the tables. It's just like, this is normal, doesn't everybody? So that feels great. So
I've been over to Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah.
Because Kelly lives in Spokane.
Okay.
So when I'd go up there to see him, sometimes we'd get into Idaho. And he has, a lot of relations there. So you were at Zen Center there and at the City Center and at Green Gulch. So how did that evolve? How did that develop?
Well, I never was that comfortable at Green Gulch. And the City Center was fine, but, I also got a little claustrophobic. But my most memorable, in some ways the most enduring influence from my time, at least I would say certainly at Page Street, was studying with Oak-san. I studied tea with her. I had Isan as a partner.
Oh, that's nice. How great.
Oh, that was really great. And also Steve Weintraub on another occasion. So quite a range. And just watching her do what she did no way could I explain anything about what tea ceremony is, but I came to appreciate a whole lot of what she is to me. And another bonus that came my way was they offered me the opportunity to be her anja, so I would go shopping with her.
Oh, that's great. That's great. How wonderful. Yeah.
I followed her around, and then I watched her perform because, she's like the mayor's wife, at least, or beyond. And, she has a kind word for everybody. And, she treats everybody like her kindergarten class, and it's just charming to watch.
That's true. That's true. I visited her the year before she died. What was she over 100 then?
She was pushing it, definitely pushing it. And if you ever check out the website there for Oak Street, you'll see a picture of our visit with her at Rinso Inn. We had a great time because.
What year? What year?
Well, I can't remember exactly, but it was
around
probably 2011.
That's very close. We were there right after we came here, 2014. Yeah, she's pretty old. 2011 too. Wow.
She was pretty spry. She was physically, she hadn't begun to be infirm physically. She was dressed gorgeously. And we hung out, and she brought with her that sort of photo memory book or whatever that the folks at Page Street gave her when she left.
Yeah.
And so she's going through this thing, and I'm giving her the dish on everybody that I know, and she loved that stuff. And so we had a lot. And you could tell it was a good occasion because at some point or other she begins to sing, and we knew that Oakson is here, and it was really a great time.
Visited her we spent a bunch of time in '94 when I was working on Crooked Cucumber, and it just finished. I finished Thank You and Okay there, and I was doing interviews for Crooked Cucumber, and then in 2003 I was in Japan a couple of weeks, and I went and visited her, and she walked to the train station. I don't know. It's like she walked. Oh, I know. When I left her. It was a good long walk from the train station to her place. She walked about half the way back with me, and that was very sweet of her. Yeah.
Well, she used.
Yeah,
excuse me.
She's just a very unusual Japanese woman.
Yeah.
I mean, they couldn't. I asked them at Rinso Inn because I've been there a number of times. I said, "Well, when Mitsu comes back from San Francisco, is she going to live here?" No. She's way too strong and independent, and to be there. That temple life is pretty, they like to have everything under control.
Sure. Plus, to Huitsu, she's a mother-in-law, right?
Yeah.
That would be hard. Anyway, you can tell she's a force anywhere she goes, and that makes sense. For me, she's got a weakness for guys, and I was very happy.
That's right.
She seemed to favor me a bit, and so occasionally she would invite me to have lunch with her. And it was a great time, and just talking was always fun. And then on one particular occasion, I got into maybe talking about my troubles or this, that, or the other. So I'm rattling on for a while. And at a certain point, she says, Peter-san, I have no idea what you're talking about, which I thought was tremendous. I felt, that was a very, very generous thing of her to say, like we were true buddies. So that was a great time, and I've been always felt that I was uniquely fortunate to have that time with her and the kind of things that she represented to me from studying tea, which is just this archaic thing, and you can spend a lot of time wondering about why you're going through these paces that are, very formal and repetitive. And of all the time that I was there, I never even learned to, the half a dozen Japanese phrases that you're supposed to, any person in there, just out of politeness, would have learned them in a week. But, so that was me.
Yeah. I only did the guest thing with tea.
Right.
That's a role. You can be a guest. And I've been a guest with her and with, what was her name? Nakamura-san at Green Gulch.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
boy,
yeah.
was she was like...
She's fierce.
She was, fierce. That's a good word for her. Yeah.
I did a little utai, maybe half a dozen times, Ken and I and a few others with her, but I didn't have much contact other than, just sort of admire her regal way of doing things.
Yeah. She should have stayed at Zen Center. She had a horrible last years in Japan. Her family just took everything from her and stuck her in an old folks' home, which is not at all traditional there. And we would have taken care of her. Zen Center would have taken care of her. But anyway.
Sure. Right.
Yeah. She was something. So now, weren't you ordained in some way, lay ordination, priest ordination while you were at...
Priest ordination in 1977.
By?
I was part of the Great Leap Forward. There were 26 of us.
By Richard Beggar.
That's right.
Yeah, I thought so. You just haven't mentioned that.
Yeah. No, all that. And, I was never... I understood, I guess that's a word we could use, priest... what looked to me like priest practice, I interpreted it as a kind of career. Mm-hmm. And that never quite fit. I was always much more inclined to appear in the world as a layperson.
Yeah, I hear you.
There's some folks that just they put on their robes and they look like they're born to do that. But always for me, it felt or looked a little bit like a costume. And I can remember actually a dinner that we went to. Richard had all the priests out for some occasion. I can't remember what. You were there. I remember you taking a pair of chopsticks and eating a fish from the inside out. I was struck by that. But at any rate, I found myself feeling a little bit not connected, and I really never had any sense of connection with Richard. Mm-hmm. He was just this guy, and he was going along and doing what he was doing. But I remember at one of the early Shosan ceremonies, mm-hmm. My question to him was, where did you get that stick that he was holding? And he said, well, you gave it to me. There's some truth to that. But upon consideration over time, I actually realized that what I had done is I gave that stick to Suzuki, and this Richard just showed up. But that's okay. I feel a debt of gratitude to his endless energy and creativity, although I feel like he probably has had a pretty hard life, all things considered.
He's doing pretty good now.
Is he?
Oh, yeah. He's what is he, 86? And his German group is really vibrant. And, yeah, those Germans are good, have been a good influence on him.
Good. Well, I had certainly aspirations at one time or other to go see Vanya, but I never made it over there.
Yeah.
And I don't think. I do keep in touch a little bit through Emila.
Yeah.
And it's impressive to watch her because, she really has developed into a teacher She counsels in a way. She's the person who a lot of the kids in the field projects at Green Gulch, these people that are studying farming and such, they go to Emila because she's there and she's somebody that they really appreciate.
Yeah. I've visited Vanya with him a few times there. He took Kobun and me to Oktoberfest once. We were just sitting there at his home in Luzerne, and he said he just got on the phone, called his brother, and he said, "Let's go to Munich, München, right?" And it was great. We had a great time, and the whole place is booked up, right?
Right.
But all of a sudden, each of us have a luxurious room in the King's Hotel with the big garden.
Yeah.
And
that's the life he wanted, and that's the life he figured out how to live.
Yeah, and I was at Johannesov, Dick Baker's place, and for 4 months once. I've been there 3 times, and so I studied German a lot when I was there, and German's very hard. And but I learned enough just to get by, to ask for things, direction, order things, say hello. And I was at Vanya's place, Felsentor, way up in the Alps above Lake Luzerne. And there's a cog train goes up. Everything is so expensive. It's better to walk up there. It's like $20 to go there and back on the cog. But anyway, I sat waiting in that cog train for somebody. It was waiting there, and the man I was sitting next to, he didn't speak any English, but I figured out he was the German contractor for Vanya's Zendo, which Paul Disco was the American contract.
Designer, yeah.
Yeah, his son, Gloria's son. Michael Coonan, I think, did more of the work, and there were, but it's this unbelievable, authentic Japanese Zendo behind this beautiful old hotel he bought there, and it's all a practice center. And the hotel Queen Victoria used to stop at and stay in. Anyway, so I'm talking to the guy as best I can. And then my friend, who's Swiss, joins us, and I said, Balthasar, would you check with him? I think he just told me that they had 500 helicopter trips to build that Zendo, bringing materials up. And Balthasar said, yeah, that's what he said. Think of that.
Yeah. Well, that's, part of the joy of, living the life that Vanya, how should I say, has been living all along. I guess I would get a kick out of seeing a little bit about what he's up to, and certainly I'm a fan of Coben's, and
yeah.
I had no contact with Coben ever, but I certainly have appreciated all the stories that swirl around his very life.
Yeah. Well, Vanya leads, actually a pretty admirable life. He spent a tremendous amount of time and money on animal rights.
Yeah, animal rights.
And he had these rescue pigs of different sizes and types. And he's done a public, he did a thing where he was in a cage for some period of time. They were taking him around, I don't know, probably, so the big cities in Switzerland, and it had something to do with animal rights. And he funded a guy who was getting death threats from pig farmers because they had cases go all the way to the Supreme Court to improve the lot of pigs. They weren't stopping them from being slaughtered. They were trying to stop them from being tortured.
That's right.
Stuff like that. And he has he's had enormous involvement with LSD, psychedelics, and
Right,
practice
right.
and all this stuff.
Yeah, with Michael
Ecstasy.
Pollan and all that stuff is coming into fashion again.
Yeah, and but he wasn't taking a lot. He thought it could have a role as it had. I mean, he was hardly doing any himself. It's something I'm not really interested in, but I certainly have know a lot of people who've been involved with like ayahuasca,
Yeah,
and there's a ton of
yeah,
stuff happening around there. All right.
sure. Well, with with all the the hyperactivity and the usual fascination with folks in the digital world with anything brilliant and shiny. There's a lot of people microdosing and getting all excited about that stuff around here. But the thing that does interest me is the possibilities of, in a therapeutic setting, people with, addictions and people with, pretty substantial emotional challenges having, some pretty impressive responses to,
Yes, definitely.
some of those. So it's treating those things as sacraments and therapeutics, which I have been for centuries anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it seems that quite the opposite of all the disinformation that came out about psychedelics is that people who've taken psychedelics are better adjusted and happier, and their brains have been integrated better by the experience. I decided in '67 that I should not continue that, and just
Mm-hmm.
do the Zen trip, chop wood,
Yeah.
carry water.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I had my introductions at various points, probably about the same era as you, and then
Yeah.
that was enough. I didn't feel
Yeah.
the need to do a lot of repetition. One taste was enough to get my attention and
Yeah.
set me on the road, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you a little bit about one of the interesting things that I have this, in a sense, feels to me like a discovery anyway. I think it started with Ted Marshall's brain cancer.
Mm.
And so this is now at least 5 years ago, but I hadn't maintained a connection with Ted. But I knew at some point that, he had pretty serious cancer. And
Yeah.
so we began to visit and really enjoyed his company. He's he has always been a kind of a master of pretty direct, warm, sane, and open-heartedness. And
Yeah.
so it was quite wonderful to spend time with him. And by that time, he wasn't. I don't know. He wasn't. Physically, he could get around okay, and he was doing various kinds of probably pretty avant-garde kinds of treatment. They went to Cuba to get various things, scorpion venom and who knows what. Also, some electronic cap that he was wearing that supposedly was a promising kind of treatment. Don't know exactly what it was doing, but it had actually developed to the point where FDA was putting these things in some kind of testing cycle. But anyway, they gave him gratis the equipment, and he was working on that. But what was really interesting was none of that, but the time we spent just spending time with him. And then we decided, well, since we're going to be spending time, and it's kind of great, what are we going to do with it? So we decided to study the Lotus Sutra.
Mm.
And for me, I'd never been able to be interested in, sort of primary source Buddhist stuff.
Yeah.
But what I discovered was that in the company of others, you get 3 or 4 people or 5 or 6 people as part of a conversation where you're reading these things together and thinking out loud about what is clear, what isn't, what's confusing, what's what. And the wheels start turning. It is really quite wonderful. So it was kind of an opening there. And so there became a group of at least 4 or 5. I can remember Alan Block, myself, Jay Simino, and a guy who was, in a sense, a disciple, a fan, maybe not, Japanese national with the name of Isan Koyama, who was studied and followed the guy in L.A.
Mayumi Sasaki.
I think Maizumi.
Maizumi.
Anyway,
yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, he was definitely part of the sort of group that would travel with him, and sort of in there. And then he considered for a period of time and sat with me, just because I would, one, I was enjoying his company, and he was in town at various points and studying with Norman in a way. But then now he's bounced on over to Shohako Okumura, and is definitely he's more of an academic anyway. But anyway, he was a great adjunct to having this person who's really super bilingual as part of the conversation as well. So that one went on until right on through Ted's passing, and spending time with Ted in his final weeks and days, as it always is. For me, you feel like you've been given far more than you've offered, but that's one of the things that happens.
Yeah.
And so we continued that class and switched on over to doing a number of the things with Red Pines.
Yeah.
And that is, dynamite, really terrific stuff. The way he translates and the way he presents things with multiple, input from other sages of that era and other times.
Yeah.
Just seems to be a very provocative and useful way of study. And I never had much contact with Red Pine, but I've come to be a total fan.
Yeah.
The way he does things and how he presents himself. I caught a little bit of a seminar he did recently, and the thing he emphasized more than once is, I'm not a meditator. I'm a translator. I tell you what the language means and everything around it that I know about, which is more than enough.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah. He's my contact to Silas Hoadley.
What's the latest on Silas? I think he was getting pretty senile, but I don't know more particularly.
Yeah. I had a conversation with Silas. What I do is I call Red Pine's Bill Porter, right? I call Bill up, and while they're on a walk, and they do that like every Friday or Thursday or Friday, or and they go to a particular place, and so my conversation with Silas, that was a few months ago, and then I had one again about maybe January. I don't know what he's saying.
Yeah. It's not. Is it Parkinson's or is it just dementia? Or do you know?
It's dementia is a lot of different things. Alzheimer's, dementia.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know. All you know is what you're dealing with, and I'd say in Silas's case, like in Yvonne's, pretty benign. Yvonne's was extremely benign.
Because
she was a tough cookie. And she was a tough cookie before she got dementia. I mean, she was very strong and everything. And with the dementia, I mean, Yvonne and I had we were close for years. But there was always a lot of, I don't know, she's a powerful woman. And there, in the last years, it was just peace, love, dove. And there was everything had fallen away that was, the world as we are attached to. And she was fairly profound. So I didn't really mourn the loss of the old Yvonne. It was a nice transition.
That sounds great. I very much appreciated the little bit of contact I had with her, but it wasn't much.
Yeah.
And so, I wasn't in that cycle that created those particular kind of connections. but I do remember her taking me, out for a ride or something. She was going somewhere or other. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Just because, no doubt, I mean, I was at Green Gulch and I probably was looking pretty miserable, and she felt, well, so I can just spend some time with this guy. So, yeah.
I can understand your feelings about having been ordained as a priest. I mean, I got ordained, while Suzuki was dying by him with Ed Brown and Lou Richmond and Angie Runyon. But he was too sick to come to it, so Katagiri did it. But, we visited him before and afterwards. But later I realized eventually that the only reason I did it was something to do with him. It was just, I had no thoughts at all about any responsibility or career or anything. And, eventually I realized, I don't mind wearing robes to the Zendo, but, I don't want any priestly function, really, as far as ceremonies go or anything. And
well, I think that was my relationship for the most part until I mean, to me, it would seem the most natural thing in the world to do these Zendos. Because I'm interested in seeing I didn't really think or imagine or plot that there would be an end point to my relationship with Norman or Everyday. But at a certain point, there was enough going on at Oak Street and then eventually in Boise so that I didn't really have time and didn't want to spread myself any further. But now that I find that I have, in a sense, a responsibility to sit with people, and I don't tend to do a lot of, practice conversations, but, people are interested. I'm happy to hear what they have to say or whatever. But I just feel very fortunate because I concluded at some point along the way that the thing that really matters more than anything else is just to continue to practice, just whatever I might have thought I needed by way of motivation is a non-issue now.
Yeah.
I am more than happy to have these people that seem to be interested. I respect them. I am interested in seeing what comes of the conversations. Our MO is really, we sit at 6 o'clock every morning of the week except Saturday. Sit for half an hour. We have a 15-minute service, and then there's probably 15 or 20 minutes of conversation that can be whatever. We may be. I'll ask about some of the language in the Heart Sutra, or we're talking about the weather, or birds, or the water conditions in Boise, or whatever. And it's just these are people that have sat together now for a couple, 2 or 3 years, and little by little, there's a few new folks that show, and people seem to really value it. So I'm completely, satisfied in that respect. And, a few responsibilities crop up. Now, this transmission thing is going to be a fair amount of work. But it was interesting because when it happened with Norman, to me, back in 2011, I think. No, that wasn't then. It was 2000. What was it? This is 22. Anyway, I was so much earlier on. So 2011 was the year that I got transmission from Norman. And that was like we were in residence at his place in Muir Beach for 5 days, and included, Jay, myself, John Bales, and I'm blanking on it. Chris Wharton, and it was great, but it was all a blur. Mm-hmm. And now I've had to learn a little bit more about it, which in and of itself wouldn't be that interesting. But I'm beginning to feel, in a sense, the good fortune of being part of the lineage of Suzuki. Mm-hmm. There's an interesting thing that I don't know if it's in the Lankavatara or somewhere, but somebody is saying to somebody else, how you understand Buddhism, maybe not so important. Your lineage, That's important. So I thought, oh, interesting. And it really is true that, from Suzuki to Mel to Norman, there's a style of practice and a simplicity and a straightforwardness that is extremely valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I'm around it, and the more I see people who haven't had that opportunity and how they present things, wow. It's really kind of wonderful. So I'm learning a little bit. I was always amazed by various people referring to these people of, a century or two ago and sort of talking about them in the sense that they're very familiar or they know some of their story. Well, I don't know them personally, and whatever story there might be doesn't necessarily interest me all that much, or these koans don't necessarily interest me all that much, although I have done some koan classes that turned out to be a little bit of a surprise in a positive way. But the sages that I have known, for example, one of the folks that I am going to be transmitting, his name is Kirk Phillips.
Mm-hmm.
He came to San Francisco as a street kid at the age of 15 or 16. He's gay. His parents wanted no part of him. I think he was in one of the Carolinas or something. His old man was a doc. He shows up. He lives on the street. He gets busted and he gets, arrested. And, he's just out there. And at some point, he turns up at Hartford Street and begins to, maybe sit a little bit or, talk to Isan or whatever. And sooner or later in that early relationship, Isan says to him, "Oh, you should study nursing." So he goes to school for who knows how long it takes. And he's been a nurse at Kaiser, and he's just retired this year, and done extraordinary work. And also, after Isan passes, he goes and studies with Darlene. And you don't get better lineage than that. And he's a jewel. He's a magnificent practitioner. He has the usual kinds of struggles and hysterias, but in fact, people love him, and for good reason. I feel particularly fortunate. I had a rather wonderful time with Darlene for a period. This is during my building phase, but somehow or other I reconnected with her when she was, in training with Mayor Schneider and developing her bodywork practice, probably before she got it into writing so much.
Yeah.
But I got to know her when she was, in a sense, really coming into her own as a practitioner, body practitioner, and teacher. And so, here I am, with this, linebacker body, and she's working on me, this crippled.
Right. We should add here that she had absolutely the worst, most crippling arthritis you can imagine, and had it since she was young.
Yeah. And so from my point of view, just on the surface, without even knowing who she is, she's earned her stripes. But the real deal is that while she's working on my body, which is all very pleasant indeed, we're giving each other the dish on everybody under the sun. And it's sort of like mind to mind. And, I don't remember any conversations that I've ever been involved in that were any better. It was just pure bliss to be with this person who is capable of saying anything, of thinking anything, freedom of a sort that I had rarely, if ever, encountered in a woman. Where there's just a kind of a wildness and an honesty that is just sets your head on fire.
Yeah. Do you know about her relationship with Nakamura-san?
I never heard that story.
Well, she was very close to Nakamura-san. She was maybe closer than anybody. Her and Jerry Fuller. Jerry Fuller was very close, but Darlene had a relationship too. And Nakamura-san, it could be very abusive. She was more than just being tough and strict. She was unbelievable. And Darlene was taking her shopping, and she was being, just
A bitch.
a bitch, just. And so Darlene took and had the car washed in a one of these automatic car washes you go through.
Right.
And as she's going through, she has automatic windows. She pushes down Nakamura Sensei's window so that this proper Japanese woman who always wore a kimono and everything has this water just powering and right on her. And the thing was, when they got out, Darlene didn't say anything, and I can't remember. I've got it somewhere. Maybe it's in Darlene's interview. Nakamura Sensei did not freak out. She sort of, I can't remember what her response was, but it was impressive. It was showing her respect for Darlene. It was amazing.
Well, that sounds right. That definitely sounds right. Well, that's the kind of thing I mean about all these worlds upon worlds of which were swirling around me, and I knew nothing about them. And I think it's always that way. But
that's right.
I just as we go along, and we've known each other forever, that we, you pick up a little bit of some of the jewels that you were in the midst of.
Yeah,
it's kind of great.
Yeah.
And you've made a lifetime out of that stuff. I'm really, I'm happy for you, and I'm delighted that you continue to plow this way. I remember, a few times in Tassajara that we had, some contact, but it wasn't, it was no big deal. And, we each go on to our, unfoldings, and it's a wonderful thing that this family way that we have unknowingly committed to and continued to, nurse, is really such a vital part, not just of our lives, but so many people have come to appreciate what he has to say, and what we have to say about our appreciation of it.
There's this sort of community of people that radiate out from Shunryu Suzuki coming to America. And some of us are, like, if you can look at Bill Kwong, he's got his world there. And he pretty much doesn't have any contact with anybody else, but it's a very important part of the lineage you were talking about. And then there's Richard Baker's, which has, he's got his Creststone thing and his German thing. The German thing is much more vibrant, but they're both going on. He's very happy with his Dharma, this wonderful young woman. She's great. And then you have Mel over in Berkeley. So easygoing and easy to relate to, and, not taking himself too seriously or anything. And you got Les Kay down in Los Altos, who, again, just a whole other world of lineage. And, and Brown, and they're so different from each other. You had Yvonne, you have, Layla, you have, I loved sitting with Layla when I was in San Rafael. There were like 5 different groups I could sit with, and I would go sit, but every one of them gave a talk. There was a talk. And I couldn't go to all those talks every week, so every once in a while I'd hear a talk, but mainly I just go sit with them and leave. And I loved Layla's, because she didn't give a talk. She just read something for 15 minutes.
Right.
But it's just so interesting. And then I talked to all these people who were from here and there and all that. And it's amazing how many people are still practicing and sitting. You wouldn't know it, you know. I just hear it over and over. In fact, it's rare not to hear it. That you can just see the influence of it, like the waves going out. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it's great. And, you know, I've been meaning to catch up with Daya. I'd love to go see her. And, you know, I ran into Kelly at Tassajara probably, you know, a decade ago now. But, you know, I've been up until the COVID time going to Tassajara every spring for the work session because that's what I like.
Yeah.
A lot of work, food, great company, reunions, the whole business. I couldn't ask for anything more.
Yeah.
And I take a bunch of people from every day or from Oak Street, and we go down and do what we do.
Yeah.
But I haven't been up to Daya's place, and I know that she got to Milwaukee, the last roundup they had with, I don't know, Soto Zan or somebody. And I went to see Bill Kwong, which was great fun. I never knew him much. I mean, I liked the look of him early on. And I could certainly understand why he wasn't going to stick around. But I do think it's unfortunate that he decided to be not connected, sort of with a little emphasis on the not connected, as opposed to just whatever. And but we had a great time.
Yeah.
And you know, his son Jose is the real deal. He looks wonderful. He's practiced at AHG, and who knows what that's like. But at any rate, he just looks like he's settled in. And, you know, very serious, but not too serious, bright and able.
Yeah.
I mean, he must be 40 plus. I mean, he might even be 50 by now, but to me, he looks
That's right.
Completely able.
That's right. Those kids.
Continue.
Those kids. I knew those kids in 66, you know. You're right. They're in their, some of them might be going on 60. Who knows?
Yeah. I didn't ever know his kids, but I met Jose and his wife for the first time probably 2 months ago. We went up there, and I gave
right?
Bill, I had an agenda. I gave Bill a copy of Umbrella Man because I felt like, you know, Mel is the true inheritor, I think, of the juice and the spirit that Suzuki really, I think, wanted to cultivate in people, which I think has a lot to do with humility and nothing you can actually cultivate. Some people, it occurs to them. That might be a good thing. But anyway, because Mel had the idea, the more the better. You know, people want to be transmitted, and you're fairly sane, and you look like you've been, you know, the ropes, and you're willing. And you know enough about what you're getting into to understand that it's nothing you can do alongside of anything else, maybe, then I'm all for you. And he you know, he's created tons of possibility for many, many people. Yeah. And I love the book. I love the concept of the book. Did you ever know Max? The guy who funded that book. He studied with Mel. Oh, he was a Google guy.
I've been in touch with him. I don't know him, but I've been in touch with him because I was in touch with Mel and quite a bit. I did 3 podcasts with Mel the last year of his life. And in fact, I want to get hold of him. I want to get hold of those people. And I had a great podcast with Liz Horowitz, Mel's widow. And she and she gets hold of me pretty regularly. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Well, I had one great conversation with Mel. I didn't ever have that much contact with him, but when I was thinking about transmission, I went to see him a couple times, and his MO was, you take him out to breakfast at his place, the place that he liked to go. And so on one occasion, I said, you know, Mel, I'm not exactly sure about this transmission thing because, you know, there's some priests that really make me wonder. and he said, no, don't worry about that. It doesn't matter one bit. says, what matters is, it doesn't matter what kind of priest you think they are. What matters is the kind of priest you think you are.
That's right.
And, I evidently needed to hear that and felt, as always, quite grateful. And I did get a chance to run into him at some Zen Center reunion, or it might have been a mountain seat or something. And I got a chance to say, Mel, that was surely the great, no, nothing. I didn't say anything like that. I just said I really appreciated the time with him.
Yeah. Indeed. And if you look at some of the people who left, like Angie Brunyon was ordained with Ed and Lou and me, right? She's like,
still around.
She's a teacher in the Tibetan tradition in Colorado.
Okay, I didn't know where she went from here, but she used to be in my neighborhood, the Zen Center neighborhood here.
She was there for years. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And you know decades. Who else I've gotten some track of? I haven't seen him in a decade or more, but Van Voorhees.
Yeah. Do you know where he is?
Oaxaca.
Right.
And yeah. When Mike J used to come to town, he would occasionally, check in with me. And I'd see Van from time to time at the Dolphin Club. But I think I saw him once in his Tibetan robes, but evidently he wears them all the time now.
Who?
Van.
Oh, I thought you. Yeah.
No, I referred to Mike Jambold.
Oh yeah, you were talking about Mike. I didn't know who you meant. Oh.
Yeah, I'm just reminded of those two because they would come to town occasionally, but they would never stay very long. They were always, Mike back to Japan, and who knows where Van was. Yeah,
I connected with Van because a close friend of ours was in Oaxaca and ran into him, and then started sending us pictures. Hey, this guy. And he's not using the name Van anymore. I can't remember.
No, he's got a Tibetan name, all right.
Yeah. Right, and he's down in a beautiful place. So this abruptly ends part 1 of the podcast with Peter van der Sterre. I've just got a lot happening, and that's long enough, and it's a really long one, and I need to get to bed. And there's a lot of cool stuff happening. Maybe I'll report on it on a special Sunday podcast. So, hey, thanks a lot, Peter. Thanks for the first half of your podcast. And this has been a Cuke Audio Podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from sleepy Sonora with Dogget Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.